Okay, long question here. How do I tackle part B of an essay if it has two parts? Like this, discuss conflicts that can arise when tackling inflation and why policy A is appropriate in tackling inflation. Now, first of all, this is indeed a rather unusual question, right? We don't typically see questions that are in part B with two parts. But just to raise something before I go on, a lot of students have been telling me when they see one question, they try to think what is R1, R2 right away. And I think that is honestly, okay, quite dreadful, okay? The purpose of planning an essay is not really to try to game the structure by coming up with your R1, R2 right away. There's a certain thought process that you have to go through. And I think of this as DBS, D for dartboard. So the dartboard means you have to consider what is the outcome you're looking at. Like in this question, it's about addressing inflation. It's about conflicts that can happen. Think of the dartboard. Next one, think of the balance. Balance means the two sides, okay? How do you come up with your thesis? How do you come up with your antithesis? And finally, try to extrapolate further. What would the stand look like? Okay, the stand is going to appear in your summative conclusion. So once you worked out the dartboard, the balance, and the stand, then we start thinking of R1 and R2, okay? So back to this question, I feel that there are two parts, but you don't have to worry too much about the second part because the way I see it, they first ask you for conflicts that can happen when you tackle inflation. Second, why fiscal policy is appropriate in addressing inflation or why a certain policy is appropriate. So what I'll do is I'll take that policy and feature it in my conflict write-up. So I could start by saying, you can use fiscal policy to address inflation. For example, you use contractionary fiscal policy, all right, to reduce demand pull inflation. This is ideal, especially if the economy is large, especially if the economy has a large multiplier. So that already addresses the second part of the question. Then I will move on to focus on whether conflicts can happen. So I can explain how, yes, fiscal policy reduces inflation, but in the process, you generate unemployment, you generate lower growth. Okay, then you go on to talk about how the conflict may not be so severe, depends on whether other elements of AD are changing, all right? Or if you change taxes, depends on the state of expectations as well. Okay, so even though there are two parts, I feel that because you still need to present your essay with a balance, which means thesis and antithesis and a stand. So it is very likely that the second part can be woven into either your thesis or antithesis. Okay, I hope that is helpful.